Let me just fix this. That's better. Okay, music. Do the thing again. Hello, this is Sim and Dave, the Can Historian, ready to combat the plague that is boring history, and looking good doing it. Today, the vast majority of people view marriage as a sacred bond between two loving people, promising to have and to hold, to love and to cherish, to cook and eat leftovers, until death do them part. But back in the day, especially at the aristocratic level, marriages were only good for securing alliances, acquiring new wealth, and pumping out that firstborn son, as well as other much lesser children. I mean, it didn't hurt if the girl was cute, but without a wealthy, powerful father, and some good birthin' hips, you are better off being free as a bird, and that bird you cannot change. No one practiced this philosophy more than Henry VIII I Am, King of England from 1509 to 1547. He managed to wed 6 different women, the most by a king until Larry King nabbed his 7th wife just a few years later. Henry was willing to do anything to find the right marriage, from breaking away from the Catholic faith, to accusing his wife of incest, to walking away from this hot German number. I mean, look at them birthin' hips. Now, before the technicality police come a-knocking on my door, let me clarify a common misconception here. Henry VIII I Am did not divorce his wives. Back then, divorce was like me finding a date to the prom that wasn't a blood relative. It just didn't happen. The only way to get around a marriage was to have it annulled, pretty much proclaiming that it never happened to begin with. Usually you need a pretty good reason to be granted annulment, but Henry became a master of coming up with excuses, and is widely credited for inventing the dog ate my marriage certificate ruse. But let's start at the beginning, because I hear that's a good place to begin. The House of Tudor came to power in 1485, when Henry VII took the crown after Richard III traded in his kingdom for a horse. Henry knew his hold on the throne was tenuous at best, as England had spent the last 30 years fighting with itself over who should be king in the Wars of the Roses, which was just slightly more violent than the so-named gardening competitions that followed. Thus, if he could wed his son to a princess of a powerful European monarchy, his dynasty would become firmly entrenched in the eyes of his people, their neighbors, and television executives. After interviewing young noble ladies from all over Europe in a process that included a question and answer session, a talent demonstration, and the highly important swimsuit category, a perfect candidate emerged in Catherine of Aragon. She was the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, rulers of the 2 most powerful kingdoms in Spain, and best known for allowing that Columbus guy to sail the ocean blue. With the Spanish on their side, no one would question the right to rule of the Tudors on the European b-ball court ever again. And so, in 1501, Catherine married Henry VII's son and heir to the throne, who was not the young Henry VIII, he's not, but his older brother, Arthur. But of course, Arthur would die 6 months later, leaving Catherine a widow at the age of 16, and spawning the new hit ABC family show, The Not-So-Secret Life of the Medieval European Teenager. Alas, the Tudors didn't want to lose their alliance with the Spanish, and besides they already spent Catherine's dowry on the all-you-can-eat mutton buffet bar. So they did the ecologically friendly thing and recycled her, as she married the recently crowned Henry VIII he is in 1509. By most accounts, Henry adored his first bride. He showered her with love, affection, and maybe once a year she showered with actual water. When Henry went away to fight the dastardly French, Catherine was an able regent, and even helped repel an invasion from the less dastardly but more pungent Scots. When Catherine's nephew Charles became not only King of Spain, but Holy Roman Emperor as well, her influence was monumental in continuing England's alliance with the most dominant force in Europe by being a good aunt and giving him Target gift cards for Christmas. All in all, Catherine of Aragon was the perfect queen, except for her reproductive organs. Henry desperately wanted a son to help continue the Tudor line after his death, as well as have someone to take to the mud wrestling matches when he got older. Catherine did give birth to 3 sons, but all of which died before their 2nd-month birthday. The only child of 6 to survive infancy was a daughter named Mary. Unfortunately, there was not yet a precedent for allowing someone with cooties to inherit the English throne, making Mary quite contrary to Henry's desires. Eventually, the king would come to believe his marriage was cursed, possibly due to his wife's previous marriage to his own brother. Catherine upheld throughout her life that her marriage with Arthur was never consummated, which meant, well, you know. Henry thought otherwise, thinking God was punishing him for having sacrosanct seconds with Catherine, and sought an annulment on this very claim. Of course, it didn't hurt that Henry was already courting another lady. Her name was Anne Boleyn, who served as a lady-in-waiting or personal assistant to Queen Catherine. She has become one of the most argued about figures in English history, with historians on one side claiming that Anne was mostly innocent in the events that were to unfold and was heavily coerced by outside sources, and with some historians but mostly movie executive and tabloid writers on the other side claiming that Anne wanted power, change, and the king and was going to shake her stuff until they were all in her grasp. As such, I will word the details regarding her motives and influence carefully as to not offend either group. Anne may or may not have started a relationship with Henry in 1526 while he was still married to Catherine, after she may or may not have resisted his previous advances. Henry nicely asked the Pope to grant an annulment for his marriage to Catherine, but was refused. So then Henry not so nicely began to cut his kingdom's ties to the Catholic Church, creating the Church of England and making himself supreme head of the faith. Anne may or may not have had pro-Lutheran anti-Catholic sentiments, and may or may not have pushed Henry to this decision. Regardless, the king had his buddy-turned-Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, declare his marriage to Catherine void in 1533, allowing him to marry Anne while she may or may not have been already pregnant with their first child. Catherine was banished to live in estates outside of London, where she continued to see herself as the true queen, and underwent strong religious devotion and fasting, all the while managing not to be all self-righteous about it. Mad props. She died in 1536 of cancer, making it one wife down. Things started great with Anne, who may or may not have made the best pies Henry had ever had. But things started to go downhill when Anne had the same baby-making problems as her predecessor. She miscarried twice, as well as gave birth to a girl, Elizabeth, which greatly disappointed Henry. Never mind that Elizabeth would arguably become the greatest monarch England ever had, and the now scientifically proven fact that gender determination comes from the father, but the king had no time for such nonsense. In addition, Anne may or may not have been getting on Henry's nerves by giving her opinion on how to run the country, and she may or may not have used the royal razor to shave her legs. A big no-no, ladies. In the end, Henry charged her with adultery, treason, and incest, as she may or may not have had extramarital relationships with other men, including her own brother. Blech! Actually, most agree this is a may not scenario, as the charges were trumped up by the king's chief advisor Thomas Cromwell just to get rid of Anne. Anne may or may not have been beheaded in 1536, okay, that's a definite may, making it 2 out for Henry. Luckily, he had a mighty fine backup already in the on-deck circle. Jane Seymour was a lady-in-waiting to Queen Anne, which made it seem like the thing they were waiting for was the promotion of becoming queen. Henry, not one to pout over his ex's execution, became betrothed to Jane the day after Anne's death, and was married about 10 days later. Sources depict Jane as the model wife for Henry, with a modest personality, a compassion that endeared her to his advisors and the people, and a personal motto that compelled her to obey and serve, something that most husbands would have to special order in a wife today. Most importantly, Jane provided Henry with his life's goal in 1537, a healthy male heir named Edward, who would actually live to see his 15th birthday, though spoiler alert, not much else. Of course, Jane just had to pass away due to the complications of 16th century childbirth, which, unlike nowadays, was not the sort of thing to make a sitcom episode about. Henry genuinely mourned Jane's death, giving her a queen's funeral, burying her next to his future spot in Windsor Castle, and ate away his feelings with Haagen-Dazs and Kit Kats, gaining the sexy figure we best know him to have today. It was strike 3 for Henry, but that doesn't mean he was out. While he did wait 3 long years to get hitched again, he was urged by his chief minister and best bro, Thomas Cromwell, to check out other fish in the European Sea. Cromwell decided to set him up with Anne of Cleves, the daughter of a Protestant German nobleman. Cromwell talked Anne up to Henry, claiming that under the gown and headdress she was, quote, a total hottie, and could, quote, pop out more airs faster than you can say primogeniture. Unfortunately, when Henry met Anne in January 1540, he was a tad disappointed with her looks, giving her a 4, maybe a 4.5 at best. While they were married a few days later, Henry just couldn't bring himself to consummate the marriage, being picky about that sort of thing, and it was annulled just 6 months later. The two eventually came to friend-zone each other anyway, with Anne thereto referred as the king's beloved sister, and Henry always went to her when he wanted to complain about his other wives. For being such a poor wingman and matchmaker, Cromwell was subsequently executed, Can we do that to the eHarmony guy already? So that's 4 wives down for Henry. Though we can't get rid of Anne completely, as she would actually outlive the king by about a decade, luckily for that alright looking head of hers. Not missing a beat, Henry found himself smitten with another lady-in-waiting, Catherine Howard, or K-How for short. Unfortunately, this relationship was pretty doomed from the start. First of all, Catherine was first cousins with Henry's second wife, Anne Boleyn, which made family reunions awkward due to that whole beheading thing. Secondly, Catherine Howard had a lot of what we call today baggage. She was forced into a sexual relationship with her music teacher when she was 13, had an affair with a secretary of the Duchess in whose house she resided when she was 14, and even got an eyebrow piercing when she was 15. I dare say. When she became queen in July 1540, many people who knew of these teenage exploits blackmailed her for money, positions, and box seats to the Chelsea game. If that wasn't enough, rumors started floating around that she became involved with the king's courtier, Thomas Culpeper, and a love letter between the two that was sealed with a kiss and had tons of XOXOs ultimately led to her downfall. K-How was stripped of her title as queen in November 1541, and then stripped of her head in February 1542. So yet another wife bit the dust. But yet Henry was given another chance at marriage, unlike most people who had 5 previous wives listed on his dating profile. This time, he sought the affections of an attendant to his daughter Mary, which I guess is less awkward than someone who worked for his wife. Her name was Catherine Parr, proving that Henry just couldn't get enough of that name. She actually rivaled the king in past marriages, as she had 2 former husbands of her own before they decided to kick the bucket on her. She was even becoming romantically involved with Thomas Seymour, brother of Henry's 3rd wife, Jane. Man, maybe the English should venture out of the gene pool every once in a while. However, when the king came a-callin' and, in July 1543, a-proposin', Catherine picked a career over love and became Queen of England. That looks much better on a Wikipedia page. Catherine became close with both of Henry's daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, and it was through her efforts that they were allowed back in the line of succession. Behind the son, Edward, of course. I mean, let's get real here. Catherine also ruled as regent while the king picked yet another fight with the still dastardly French, and it is believed that her strong rule influenced young Elizabeth on how to become an effective queen, garnering Judi Dench's Best Supporting Actress Oscar for just 8 minutes of work. Most importantly, Catherine actually outlived the king, as Henry VIII I am died on January 28, 1547. Upon Edward VI's coronation, she left the court to marry her love, Thomas Seymour, until he impregnated her and caused her to die in childbirth in September 1548. The nerve of some people. So Catherine Parr was gone, making Anne of Cleves, who survived until 1557, the victor in the Ultimate Wife Survival Tournament. I credit them hips. While the 6 marriages of Henry VIII he was makes for an interesting topic, and easy fodder for terribly trashy romance fiction, it had major historical consequences as well. Henry's break from the Catholic Church after they forbid his relationship with Anne Boleyn began the long process of transforming England into a Protestant fortress, begetting future conflicts like the attack of the Spanish Armada, the English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, all the way to the Troubles in Northern Ireland in the late 20th century, as well as the bar fights that continue there to this day. Though, let's be honest, those could really be about anything. Henry's daughter through Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth, would rise above the initial disappointment of her gender, the dubious legality of her parents' marriage, and the soullessness that came with being a ginger, to become an excellent queen who truly boasted England as a world power for centuries to come, though she loses some cool points with high schoolers since she ruled when Shakespeare was a thing. In addition, Henry's 4 marriages to women from his own kingdom helped further establish the idea that the king didn't have to wed for the sole purposes of alliances with outside kingdoms, which is good news for William and Kate in all of their adorableness. In the end, Henry VIII's wandering eye altered the course of history forever, more so than Zsa Zsa Gabor and her 9 useless husbands. Thanks for watching this presentation of the Canned Historian. Of course, there's a lot more to explore in this topic, and I would encourage you to do your own research into the fascinating history of Tudor England. Hey, I can't do all the work for you, you lazy bum! You can also check out my other histories on my YouTube channel, as well as on my blog, both of which can be accessed by clicking those magical pictures on the screen. Isn't technology annoying? I mean amazing? As always, remember, those who don't study history are doomed!